I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Katrina Hyde, who is from the Lincoln International Business School, and talking about the topic of policy insight and advice, leveraging digital availability and competence. Okay, look forward to hearing about this one. I said I will ring my phone when you're getting close to your time. So I will shut up now and not take any more of your valuable time and hand over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. So as Andy said, I'm Katrina Hyde. I am a senior lecturer in accountancy, finance and economics. And what I'm going to talk to you about is leveraging digital ability, which is a really fancy way of saying how you engage with external stakeholders. So to kind of talk to you a bit about this, I actually work 3 days a week, and what I've put on the slide there are all the external stakeholders who I have had in to speak to students. I'm going to say in the last year, but actually it's since November, and the majority of them have been in February and March. So in terms of what I've done 3 different types of events. I have done large public events with policymakers. So if you see in the top left-hand side there, the Bryden report is a big report that has been developed on the future of the audit profession. And Sir Donald Bryden came to speak to the students and also the chartered accountants in the East Midlands. The Financial Reporting Council, which you can see there in the middle, Sir John Thompson, who's head of the Financial Reporting Council, came to speak again to the students and chartered accountants in the region. Now, those 2 events actually resulted in over 1,400 stakeholders engaging either by attending on the night or watching the video subsequently. So in terms of getting engagement, there's a lot of engagement. The other 2 kind of types of events I've done is sort of embedded within the subject area lectures, where I've brought practitioners in to talk about what they've been doing, about the work that they do to just make it more engaging for students. And the 3rd event I've done is employers events, where I've invited employers in to talk about how students can develop their skills or what they need to do to work within a particular area. So this really has been a fairly big event. Now, I think I did say I've always done this. I've always had external speakers in, but it's been so much easier in the blended environment. And I'll talk to you a bit about what I've done, how I've done it. So in terms of oh, I've lost part of my slide. It initially said how to approach speakers. Oh, there we go, it's appeared now. One of the things when talking to my colleagues about this is they've sort of said, well, how did you get these people, particularly the big speakers? And what I would say, one of the key bits of advice I could give to anybody organising guest lectures or guest speakers is that people who do this sort of thing do this sort of thing. So if you happen to be at a conference and you hear somebody speak very well, feel free to invite them to speak. All they can do is say no. So I've said that regular speakers are comfortable speakers. Academics are comfortable speakers. If you know somebody is researching into a particular area and you're trying to set an assignment on it or you're trying to teach on it, why not contact that academic and ask if they'll come and speak to your students? In terms of network, it's the same sort of principle. If you know someone who might know someone, you are more likely to get them to come and speak. And I would always recommend that you go straight to the speaker. So if you want the top speaker to come and talk to your students or to talk to, even academics, why not ask them yourself? Contacting generic email addresses is unlikely to result in the person you want. If you can identify a name and get an email address and contact that person, you are much more likely to get them to agree to come and speak. And when you're doing this, it is really important that you tell them what you want them to talk about. So if someone was to contact me and say, can you talk about Brexit? I would quite simply say no. However, if they asked me if I could come and talk about audit and what I need to do, I'd be much happier to do that because that is my key area. Now, one of the big advantages of this is you are asking for an R. Now, most of you probably do know because you're probably from Lincoln, but Lincoln can be quite difficult to get to. So if you're contacting somebody who's based in Newcastle or based in London, you're essentially asking for them to give up an entire day of their time. If they're doing it virtually, you're asking them for an R. And the final kind of bit of advice on approaching speakers I would give is that remember what you're asking for. You're asking them to give up their time to come and speak to your students. They're doing you a favour. So be flexible. If you contact someone and say, hi, I was wondering if you might come and speak about this specific topic. It should only take an hour because it's a virtual lecture. I plan to record it. Would that be okay? And then say, perhaps you could come in February. They're much more likely to say yes than if you say, can you come next week at 2 o'clock on Tuesday? People are busy, so just be a bit sort of aware of that and think, you know, the amount of notice you might need. In terms of an event like this, it can take up to 6 months to put together. So some of the bigger events that I've done, I've been working on for a very, very long time. Now, some of them are very straightforward. I send one email, somebody writes back and says, yes, I will do, and we agree a date, and it all works out very easily. But it can take a significantly longer time than that. So now is sort of the time to be thinking about next academic year. So if you are someone that you're thinking of contacting, contact them and saying, would you like to come in the back quarter of 2021 is likely to be more successful than contacting somebody just before. Now, one of the things that has really surprised people is how much engagement I've got from students. One of the things I've realised is that students don't read generic emails. And if we send something from the virtual learning environment, if we put something on our portal, what tends to happen is students miss it because they assume it's generic. So I email students directly and maybe multiple times and tell them what the event is. If possible, I would recommend you timetable the event. It just makes it an awful lot easier, but that's not always possible. So the policymaker ones that I did obviously were evening events. So I emailed students, told them about the event, and I put stuff on the VLE. And when I emailed students directly, quite a few students came back and said, oh, I didn't know about this. So emailing them directly, ideally with a catchy title like your attendance works very, very, very well, and then you invite them to the event. You want to make sure that if it is a public lecture and things, that actually your speaker is happy about what they're going to do and that they know you're going to record it and they know who's going to be there. So if it is a public lecture, make sure they're aware of that and they're comfortable with the sort of questions they're going to need. Our software is relatively straightforward. Most people have got very, very aware of using Teams now, so it's all made it an awful lot simpler to get your speakers in. But a pre-meeting does help. One, it sort of gives you a chance to communicate with the person and find out what they're happy to talk about and what they will take questions on or won't take questions on. But two, it just makes sure that they're comfortable with how they present with the software they're going to be using. And the other bit of advice, and I'm sure I probably don't need to tell you this, but sending a personalised thank you afterwards, which tells them what you really enjoyed about their lecture, what they did and how that helped your students, usually goes down very, very, very well. What I would say is that this, I'm running out of time. This is a really, really time-consuming thing, and I think sometimes people think a guest lecture is an easy option. It definitely isn't. So the bigger lectures I've done have probably taken me about 60 hours to coordinate. It is not an easy option, and sometimes you'll contact speakers and they just won't want to do it. So again, if you've got lots of lead time into this and somebody says, no, you just get somebody else or you do it yourself, but just be aware of that. In terms of finding people who will speak, now I did say about regular speakers being comfortable speakers, but one thing you have to worry about is people wanting paid. So if you're looking on LinkedIn or anything like that, and it says that somebody's a motivational speaker or a public speaker, they probably want paid. That doesn't mean you can't invite them, it just means you're going to need to think about the budget requirements of that. And again, the more people involved in the event, the more work you're going to have. Oh no. The final thing that I want to say here is that it is not appropriate, I don't think, to expect guest speakers to teach. So if you're going to assess the content, I think it's your job to deliver it. This is extra, this is added value, this is student engagement. So in terms of why this links back to blended learning, it's really important because it helps students get an overall better experience. The student engagement has been very, very, very high with this. I now have students contacting me, asking me for specific speakers or speakers on particular areas. Obviously, you get the benefit of having people come from all kinds of different environments, and that's going to help the overall learning experience. And from a sustainability point of view, there's no travel anymore, so that's just better for the environment. They also get to see the soft skills in action, they see the interaction with the speakers, and everything's recorded, so that helps with accessibility. And for me, one of the key benefits of this is there's no need for money. There's no hotel stays, there's no trains, there's no need to negotiate long periods of time. So the final point I'd like to make is that online speakers, it doesn't have to be just for COVID. So even if we return to the classroom environment, I will continue to invite speakers from across the world who will help my students and help their overall experience. So if anybody does have any questions, you can feel free to pop them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Catriona. Yes. Please, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. But one of the thoughts that came to my mind as you were speaking was, I mean, yeah, you can see how the online environment must make it much easier to get people from diverse backgrounds and diverse locations to come and talk to your students. But if you've gone the other way, have you encouraged your students to go out and talk into other environments through the same mechanism, or even mixing different cohorts?
No, absolutely. So one of the things I do is I'm a chartered accountant. I work locally with the chartered accountants. It's a volunteer position. I don't actually work for them. So one of the things that I've actually arranged with them, and I've actually partnered with them for those big events as well, is that some of our students can attend the events that they're organising as well, and the networking opportunities there, and that's worked really, really, really well as well. And again, much broader than it's ever been in the past. So there's an event happening in Staffordshire in April that I've invited all of our third year students on graduate recruitment. So that works really, really, really well.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Dave Pritchard has put a question in. What balance do you use for guest speaker versus Q&A, time-wise, so to speak? I think he's looking for a hint there.
I think it depends who's coming to speak. I mean, if you've got someone coming in to talk within a lecture environment, students are probably expecting a 50-minute lecture. So what I tend to do there is I'll ask the speakers to talk for about 40 minutes and allow 10 minutes of questions. And again, another bit of advice, it helps if you have got a guaranteed couple of students who are going to ask questions, so it sounds like they're engaged in the discussion. With the kind of big speakers, because there was a lot of professionals coming, they only spoke for about half an hour because there were lots and lots of external questions coming in. And with both of those lectures, we went slightly over time. And in fact, I had to stop questions because there was just so many coming in. But as I said, I mean, like in terms of engagement, we had 1,400 people between those two events, which is absolutely massive and way beyond anything we had before. In terms of global speakers, I've certainly had people coming in from throughout the UK. I haven't had anybody internationally yet this year, not really for any reason other than, so, you know, I started doing this more and realised that it was taking off and that people were just saying yes to me. And as I say, not everybody did, but it was working really, really well. And then I got to the point where I started putting speakers into other people's lectures because I just had too many. And I also have ended up now that people are adding me to LinkedIn and sort of oh, I see you organised this. Well, perhaps I'd be interested in coming to speak. So I've already built up quite a network of people who are going to come and speak next year as well. There are some people I've identified internationally, but I haven't contacted them yet. But it's remarkable what a direct email can do. And just putting a little bit of effort into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your talk.